All right, guys. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending on where you are, what time you're listening to this. My name is Winston, the content marketing guy, and I'm absolutely thrilled and consider it truly an honor and a privilege to have our guest with us today, Chris Walker. I mean, I've been following Chris for a very short time, but the reason why I absolutely had to have Chris on the Conversation with Marketers podcast is because, through observation of his content, I can see that, he's someone that actually knows what he's talking about and he actually knows what he's doing, not necessarily someone who just read a bunch of blog posts and came online and just basically repeating what he read. So let's just jump right into it. Let's not waste any time. How did you get involved in marketing, sales, the whole works? Tell us about that.
Yeah, yeah, man. So it was an interesting transition for me. I studied engineering in college, and as I think back, I feel like I kind of fell into a trap of doing what I thought society wanted me to do. Engineering, good background, good starting salary, whatever those like metrics are that people would push you into a certain career. And when I decided what to do in college, I did I didn't even think marketing was like a real thing or a real upside to do, which is just I think how people are conditioned early on. So anyway, I studied engineering, which provided an incredible framework for how I do marketing today, because I look at marketing like a giant system. You have a lot of inputs and outputs, and depending on which levers you pull, you get a different output. And so I kind of build them like I was designing a microprocessor in college. And so I jumped into an engineering role right out of college. Quickly found out that that wasn't maybe the best use of my skills and interests. Moved into product management, but mainly focused on upstream. So going out and talking with customers and defining products and communicating with engineering about what to build. And then made the leap into a more of a downstream role. I was in a company that had a mature product, and my main objective during that role was how do we get this into the market faster. And so that was when my career kind of changed. I'm very happy that I had the framework of the upstream side of marketing. I think it's a place where a lot of B2B marketers don't have. They don't understand the strategy and all the work that goes into actually figuring out what product to build, and then who it's positioned for, and then how to sell, and then moving into how to sell it. And so that's a quick snippet of how I got here. And then I started Refine Labs about 10 months ago, mainly because I had worked at two venture-backed companies. Both of them were incredibly sales-driven. I saw that was how most companies out there are positioned. And I had an approach to marketing that I thought could solve a lot of the growth challenges that companies are facing, which is that as they continue to grow, they continue to hire more salespeople, and their revenue model continues to get more and more inefficient. And so the venture capital funding that they take on hides a lot of those inefficiencies for a period of time. But at some point, companies will recognize that they need to do marketing well in order to continue to grow, because of the way that buyers have changed and how they research and discover products. And so that's how I got here. My team is up to 5. We've been at it for 10 months. We're growing fast. We work with a lot of great companies and that sell hardware and software, B2B, typically products that are more on the expensive side. So I would say 8K and up ACVs, ranging probably 8 to 100K ACV. The indicator for that is that it's non-transactional. And so we do spend some time on performance marketing, but a lot of our efforts are focused on brand marketing. And it's interesting because when you actually do brand marketing well, it performs better than a lot of performance marketing. So we cover the intent-based channels, but when I talk about brand marketing, I talk about how to get people aware of you and what you do, which then is a top of the funnel awareness for whatever you're actually trying to accomplish with your product. And so I'm living it right now. All the things that I help our clients do, I do myself. We continue to experiment with new approaches under my own personal brand. And when we see things that we see tactics that start to see signs of success, we roll them out to our clients. So we're consistently iterating on our own strategy by seeing what works for us. And I think a lot of companies out there, especially marketing agencies, don't practice what they preach. The SEO agency that doesn't have good SEO, the outbound SDR consulting firm that is getting most of their business through content marketing, not outbound, the video marketing agency that doesn't produce videos for their own lead gen. Like, those are some of the examples that I see, and so I take it very seriously about I have a pulse on exactly what's working because I know what's working for me.
Right. And I mean, just through everything that you're speaking about, I had to be laughing to myself because I believe so much in a lot of the things that you just said. I mean, there's so much to dissect in what you just said. And the first one that I definitely want to touch on is the whole fact that a lot of digital marketing agencies, they don't practice what they preach. And I thought maybe it was just a thing where I am, because I'm from Jamaica, so I thought maybe it was just a Jamaican thing. It's just a Caribbean thing where a lot of these companies are saying, hey, we can sell you on social media services, but then when you look on their page, there's hardly any followers, hardly any engagement. There isn't really any evidence that they are practicing what they're preaching, but yet they're going out and saying, hey, we can offer these services. And one of the things I always ask myself, how can you be guaranteeing success, or at least promise success to a client, when you can't achieve the same level of success for your own business? So that part I definitely agree with. And also something that you touch on, which I can definitely attest to, is the whole fact that a lot of companies are very sales driven. Because I've worked in 2 separate B2B companies, or I think 3 B2B companies. Initially went in, was supposed to be a marketer, but after like a few weeks they said, hey, forget about this marketing stuff. We need to focus on sales because that's what's driving revenue right now. And it's not that I disagree, but I think there really needs to be a balance between the sales that's bringing in money right now, but also the marketing that builds that long-term brand and establishes that company as a thought leader or an authority in their space. So what I'd love for you to touch on is just how can we make that balance, or how do you make that balance? Is it that your approach to marketing for your agency and your clients is strictly inbound, or is there an outbound sales aspect to it as well?
Just one thing I want to touch on and get in there. So we talked about, or you just mentioned that companies are focused on sales and they don't have their marketers end up not doing anything or doing different things. Like, most companies that think they're doing marketing are doing performance marketing, which is actually sales.
Right.
The only KPI is leads, and that's probably what they look at. I had one just before we got on the call. There was an Instagram swipe up ad for a SaaS product. I swiped up. It was interesting to me. All I wanted to do was watch a 3-minute video about what it was, and I probably would have converted, but all they gave me was a form to submit. And so they're just like, they're not educated on how to drive an actual customer journey. They're only educated on the end result, which is a lead. And in that pursuit, they actually lose out on a ton of business because they don't consider the consumer inside of their marketing. And so companies in general, B2B companies, have 2 sales teams. They have a marketing team that's only focused on sales, and then they have a sales team, right? And so I think that they need to have, I think that marketing teams, it would be smart more from a mindset standpoint to separate brand and performance. And the way that you would do that is the performance marketing side is focused on demand generation, traditional demand generation metrics. And the brand side would be any marketing execution that you do that doesn't need a direct attributable ROI.
Right.
Right? Like, what I commented on a lot because people say, oh, like, you could definitely track the ROI of your LinkedIn post. And I'm like, no, I couldn't, because if I did track the ROI of my LinkedIn post, then an executive would have shut my LinkedIn down 6 months ago because it took me time to build equity. And I'm never asking for anything. I don't have any calls to actions. I'm just putting out information and then waiting for people to recognize that, which creates brand and awareness, and the people that recognize that I can help come to me. I believe that the companies that we work with, I'm not saying that companies should be 100% inbound. I actually think that's what we do, but I actually don't think that that's smart for most companies, especially ones that are much larger. I think that they need a blend of inbound and outbound, but I think that they define inbound incorrectly. And so it's not that companies shouldn't go outbound, it's that they should have a healthy blend of inbound and outbound, with the inbound contribution sourced through brand and thought leadership, not through performance, or at least a heavier mix on brand, because that's going to give you the long-term equity for long-term growth.
Right. So, and that's a good point. But how do you have that conversation with your clients or anyone in general? Because I've spoken to a lot of marketers, especially in the last year or two, just to kind of get an understanding of the challenges that I have. Is it a case where I'm exclusive in terms of the challenges that I experience, or is it that other people are experiencing the same thing? And what I've come to realize is right across the board, every marketer is experiencing the same thing. So how can they have that conversation where they can get management to see the value in marketing, see the ROI, even though it's not immediate, it's not revenue driven? How can they now convince them or have that conversation that they can help top management see that value?
This is going to be a tough pill for some of the listeners to swallow, but the real answer is to find someone to work with who believes in it. Because all you're doing, and I've been through this a lot, all you're doing at working at companies that don't believe in it is trying to convince people that are not going to be convinced.
Right.
And I would much rather, as a marketer, spend my time with someone who already believes what I believe in, and I'm aligned with their vision and they're aligned with mine, which then empowers me to do my best work.
Right. That is true. I mean, you're actually the second person I've heard say that, and I've actually experienced it myself, where it got to the point where I realized that no matter, because my thing is always content marketing, which is an aspect of inbound as well, and it got to a point where I realized that I couldn't convince them that this was the best way to do it, because as I mentioned, they're looking on that short term or ROI, return in terms of revenue, and not understanding the value of building a brand over time. And I believe it's even more imperative.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but even because content marketing is going to get you revenue, if you're not doing solely SEO, it's going to get you revenue fast too if you know how to distribute it. And even in companies, like I worked at a company where they were doing $8 million in revenue, and the first year we started doing content marketing, from $0 to $1 million inbound contribution in 12 months. And even at that amount of revenue contribution with the incredible upside to keep going with almost no investment, management didn't want to do it, and they went to hire 10 more salespeople. And so I learned that even with the revenue contribution, a lot of people just will never be convinced. And so that's why, given just my experience at companies, that's why I recommend the path to just go and find someone that believes in it, because it is a long, frustrating path, and you will learn a lot about organizational behavior and psychology through that journey. But I think that it stunts you in the long term.
Yeah. And I'm really glad that we got the chance to have this conversation, Chris. I must be honest with you, because it's refreshing in a sense for me to know that this isn't an issue that's limited to just where I am in the Caribbean, but it's actually probably even a global issue. I mean, someone who, because for us on this side of the world, we see the US, we see UK, even in Singapore and China, where these guys seem to be way ahead in terms of marketing, and we're at least a decade behind, to be honest. But yet, you're telling me that you're still experiencing the same challenges that we are in terms of convincing people of the value that marketing really has, especially from a brand marketing standpoint.
Yeah, and
So
I think there's a balance here because, and like I will in some ways contradict my own point of view here because it's more, I'm speaking at a mindset level and then at a tactics level. At a tactics level, you must be able to demonstrate that you are bringing in qualified pipeline and revenue inbound from your activities. At a mindset level, you must be sure that you are not trying to do those things, that you are 100% buyer centric, which then leads to all the things at the bottom in the tactics. And
right,
people confuse that statement a lot, and they mix the two, right? So like we're getting inbound pipeline and revenue through buyer focused content marketing, but then we're pushed for management to run an ad to everyone that says come get a quote, because they think that's what's actually going to get you the stuff, because they're salespeople, not marketers.
right, right. All right. So, kind of on that same point, let me just slightly switch gears to something that I found interesting on your profile, on LinkedIn profile, that is. And on it says Refine Labs helps companies optimize their revenue model, and so that they have, well, you're saying that you have a perfected process called the revenue engine optimization formula, which sounds very interesting. Tell us a bit more about that, and in terms of what can you share, but just how that entire process works. What that formula is about, and how have you applied it to clients that you've worked with.
Sure. So at a macro, companies are overweight in sales budget relative to marketing budget. So for sake of round numbers, let's pretend that you have a $10 million commercial budget that includes sales and marketing. Then most companies will spend somewhere between 6 and 8 million on sales, and maybe 1 to 4 million on marketing. But the ratio is imbalanced because they don't understand the value of marketing for a couple of reasons. One, probably because marketing at that company hasn't proven that they deserve more budget.
Right.
So there's a lot of confounding factors here. Management thinks that they must have sales. Marketing is not doing the right things to contribute the revenue to demonstrate their value to make management think that they can do more.
Right.
And so you end up with a revenue team that is grossly overweight in sales, which is then going to lead to increasing over time customer acquisition costs. And
Right.
so as you continue to grow, your CAC is going to continue to rise, and you need to continue to demonstrate a certain percentage of growth. So as your base gross revenue continues to grow, it's going to be harder to continue that path, which makes you hire more salespeople, which increases your customer acquisition costs over time. And so the way to fix all of those issues is to fix your marketing engine, which then it empowers you to not need to hire so many salespeople to continue to grow at the same rate and lower your customer acquisition costs over time. And inside of the marketing thing, so like, let's just look, how do you fix your marketing? Our process is built in 3 steps, which is evaluate what's going on right now and assess. And so when we go and make that assessment, we'll find a couple things. We'll find that the stuff they're doing is ineffective. They're going to trade shows. They're spending $250,000 in brochures and print magazines and running banner ads to accounts and not doing anything. And they're wasting a lot of their marketing dollars. Another potential area is that their marketing is doing something. They just don't know how to measure it. They don't know how to measure it and then communicate that to management. And the most common, especially as you start to get to more mature marketing organizations, is that they create good content, but they don't know how to distribute it so that their audience consumes it. And so that one, I think I'd like to spend a little bit of time on. So we have a company, they have a brilliant case study that shows that they had incredible results at a nice company that's just like a lot of the companies that they're going after. And it's sitting on their resources page on their website with 24 views in the past 6 months, which tells me that they don't know how to communicate. They don't know how to distribute content. And so a lot of I would say that a majority of companies that are listening to this fall into this bucket. They create good content and they don't know how to get people to read it. And so we'll identify that. And then the next step of the process is, okay, let's evaluate your content assets. Let's figure out what pieces are good and usable. Typically in that process, we need to reformat them to the formats and distribution mediums that we know are going to work, because we've done this at enough companies that I know if I'm running a case study in a Facebook ad, it must look like this. It must take this long to read. It must say these things. We want to see the person read it for this long in Google Analytics. Like, we know that it's all locked in. And so let's pretend that all of those things happened. We take their existing content, we'll run it on the channels that we know work. We'll figure out which one works for them, and we find different things at each one. Some companies have incredible results with YouTube pre-rolls, with a case study video. Some companies have incredible results with Facebook ads. A couple of our newest clients are having really strong results with LinkedIn organic through their CEO's profile, kind of like what I'm doing. And so it varies, which is why we test. And while we're doing those tests with existing content, we're putting the pieces in place so that they can execute a modern content strategy, sort of like the one that I do. And it's not like I just made this. I've been doing this for brands for 5 years.
Right.
What I'm doing for myself, I did for companies before me, just underneath their logo, not my own name. And so we put together their content strategy, which is built on a mix of short form written content for Facebook ads and long form video content that can be broken up and put across channels. And then as we start to ramp up the content, we'll continue to see results of inbound as you communicate effectively with the people that you're trying to reach. Even if the content's not good, just solely the fact that you're reaching them, right, will give you better results than you are today, right? Like, the difference between spending $50,000 on a trade show booth and spending $50,000 on Facebook ads that don't even really work well, you're still going to see benefits in better marketing ROI, increase inbound leads, solely based on the fact that people pay attention there. And the third step of the process is that as they start to ramp up the content, we have the distribution channels that are working locked in, and we continue to increase the media spend in the content production by a framework we call post-production, which is how do you take one video and create a ton of different assets underneath it that can go across a bunch of different channels, which then over time lowers the cost, quote unquote, per impression, because you have one piece of content that's cost $5,000 to produce, and you have it you put it out across a bunch of different channels and get a lot of views organically, which then, like I said, lowers your cost per impression. And that is basically the framework. So as you start to see the inbound leads come in and the inbound revenue come in, that gives you confidence to invest more in marketing, so you don't feel so much pressure to invest so much in sales to continue driving your revenue growth. And over time, you arrive at a more balanced revenue function. You are less reliant on outbound SDR cold calling. It's not to say that you shouldn't do that, but maybe you don't need 30 people doing that. Maybe you just need 4. Right. Because those deals are winning at 2% and the inbound deals are winning at 40%. And when you're winning deals at 40% instead of 2%, you don't need so many account executives to close those deals, because you don't have to do 50 demos to win 1. You only have to do 3. Right, right. And then you don't have so many account executives. So what happens then? Well, then you don't have to have a bunch of account executives making like a relatively low salary. You can hire experienced account executives, pay them better. And then what happens? Now you have experienced account executives and pay them better, and they're more experts in the market, and they're not doing so many demos that they're losing. Well, maybe then they can focus on building their own personal brand on LinkedIn and doing content marketing and be your buyer focus. And then what happens? Then maybe the AEs are having so much success with that you don't need to do any SDR work. And then you move to a full funnel account executive model. Your marketing engine's running. And as you can see, as I paint this picture, it can completely change your business. And then what happens? So your revenue model becomes optimized. You have a lot of inbound flow. They're closing at a high rate. Your account executives are running at high octane. You don't have a huge reliance on outbound. Then you take those dollars and you start investing in product. You start investing more heavily in success, investing more heavily in the rest of the infrastructure of the business. And that is how you systematically change a company from a sales-driven company to a marketing, product, and sales-driven organization.
Oh, that's incredible. Like I love that answer so much, and the reason why is because you literally broke it down from step one all the way to step 3, 5, 10, in terms of how we can actually optimize that process. I love it. That was awesome. That was good. So
Thanks,
let
man.
me just
That
back.
was fun.
No, like I was sitting
Yeah,
down in awe, like
and if
yeah.
you want to, I know we have this book for a half hour, but I got some time, so if you want to keep going, I can do it.
Yeah, sure. No, I have a lot more questions. Don't worry.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
So let's backtrack because one of the things that you mentioned was you worked with a client where you literally went from $0 to $1 million in a year. So let's say I came to you. I'm a brand new client. I'm just getting started in terms of I have this new product, but I haven't actually gone to market with it as yet. What's your go-to-market strategy in terms of how you take that client from zero, brand new product to actually, getting it launched in the market and actually building that revenue within a 12-month period to profitability?
hmm So it's interesting because I actually don't work with companies that are not in the market already.
Okay.
That don't have the reasons being is you may not have clear product market fit. You may not know who you're selling to. You
Right.
may not have a repeatable sales process. And for those reasons, if you inject a marketing engine on top of that, it's it, a couple things could happen. One, it could work, but two, it could expose all of these different strategic issues. And so our model accelerates growth for companies that are already growing.
Right.
It doesn't. It does not. It does not take a bad company and make them great. It does not take a product that it could work for an innovative product, but we choose to work with companies that we know are going to see success. And the success indicators are typically you have the product is generating over $2 million in ARR. And so that's a surrogate for that the product has acceptance in the market, and you have some semblance of a repeatable sales process, and you have the churn metric is relative, but typically we want to see clients that we work with to have a churn metric that's above 95, minimum of 90, meaning that if we start to sell the product, that there's actually going to be a CLV behind it. Because if they're going to churn, then we're obviously not going to see the impact long term.
Right.
And so, I can talk about this a little bit because I have launched products before, and I know how I would do it. And so, this is a brand new company, or it's a company with a new product. Which one?
Let's say new product. Let's say new product. Right.
Okay, new product in an existing company. So the first thing that I would do, and let's just assume that the strategic work has been done. So the product has been created in a way that the market needs. They know who they're selling it to. They have the right value proposition. Let's assume those things are done. Then the first thing that I would do is make sure that I have the right team to execute. And so inside of that team, I think at minimum, depending on the size of the company, this is going to vary, but at minimum for a company to do this, you're going to need 4 core functions. You're going to need a subject matter expert that understands customers deeply and is seen as a peer.
All right.
So if you're selling to emergency medicine physicians, I think it would be a really great idea to have someone that has worked in emergency medicine that works for you. That's how you build content marketing. The only other alternative is to get a great content marketer that has those relationships that can pull the information out of those people, kind of like what you and I are doing here in a way to create content. But you must have a subject matter expert or get access to those experts.
Right.
You're going to need a creative. You're going to need someone that can make videos and pictures and write things. You're going to need a distributor, someone that is really strong at paid media and social media marketing in order to get the people that you want to see it. We use paid to accelerate results, and then over time try and converge on organic. But if the paid media is returning an ROI and I'm paying 30 cents for someone to read my content and I'm getting a certain amount of revenue back from that read, then that is something that you should do. So companies love to think about things in only organic terms. But if thing costs 30 cents and it works, then you should do it.
Right.
And then the fourth person you need is the architect. The architect's a really interesting position for me, which I think about is someone that sees everything, synthesizes how the channels are working, and decides where to go and how to do it. And so I think that one is super interesting because when you're running a multi-channel approach, you need that person to understand which levers are being pulled and which ones are generating results. Kind of goes back to the thing we talked about first, which is looking at it as a system, right? You have 6 channels running and you're doing brand marketing, so you're not going to have clear attribution. And so how are you going to know which things that you're doing are the right things to do and which ones should you cut? Because we're not running performance, direct response garbage. And so with that said, like the way that I figured it out once, and this is me just working inside of a company and no one told me to do this, it was just being intuitive. We have all of our channels running. Up to that point, we'd spent $5,000 a month on Facebook ads, and we had thought that the Facebook ads were driving a lot of stuff, and I had a really good feeling about it. But the next month, we spent $50,000 on Facebook ads. And what happened when we ramped up the Facebook spend by 10x? The inbound pipeline went up 9x. And therefore, we determined that the Facebook ads were the key driver in the entire engine. And once we learned that, we started taking money from other channels and putting more of it over there. And so just gets back to the architects. You need the team of 4 people that I just mentioned at minimum, and then you can further specialize as you go down. Right inside of creative, you can have a designer and a writer and a videographer and a video editor or whatever. And then you got to have the plan. And so I think a lot of companies, interesting on this one, they try and do everything as opposed to doing only the things that they know work best.
Right.
And so if I was going to launch a product and it's 2020, I wouldn't launch it at a trade show, which is what a lot of companies do. They wait 6 months with a product that's already ready to launch it at a trade show, which is entirely stupid. So I wouldn't go to trade shows. I wouldn't run banner ads. I wouldn't do any print. I would make sure the sales team is equipped. We should assume that the sales team is equipped and they have the enablement tools and all those things. The first thing from a content standpoint that I would do is make sure the product's in the hands of a couple customers that are friendly, that are going to see success. And I would create a case study around that story. I would go on site. I would film interviews, get a bunch of B-roll, make a 3-minute video, do a bunch of long form interviews while we're there, create a web page around it, and build a month-long campaign about that. And I would run that on Facebook ads and YouTube pre-roll and LinkedIn paid and LinkedIn organic, targeted at exactly who I'm going after. And that would get the things going. The next thing I would do is I would write a press release. My format on press release is basically the way that a press release should be done in 2020, not in 1998. So I'm not releasing it to the wire. I'm publishing it on my blog.
Right.
And I'm running job title, field of study, professional association, interest-based targeting on social platforms, driving traffic to there as a gateway to awareness of whatever news I want people to consume. And through that awareness, we'll create inbound opportunities. And then I would continue to iterate. I would go and I would interview thought leaders that are exactly like the market that I'm going after. I would start an episodic video show. I would create content and know how to distribute it. And that is basically the model.
All right. So you spoke a lot about organic reach, paid social. Do you actually take an account-based marketing approach? And if so, how do you actually go about doing it and in which scenarios?
No. I think account-based marketing in the way that it's framed up today is account-based sales. It's account-based performance marketing, or it's account-based sales with marketing support, neither of which I think are that effective because you already have a sales team. So why don't you let your marketing team do marketing?
Right.
And that's kind of how I think about it. Like a marketing team working with a gift vendor to design a box that they send to somebody in order to try and get a meeting is sales, not marketing. You know, running banner ads that never get clicked, that show your logo, I think is a very inefficient way to get whatever you want to have happen done. LinkedIn sponsored content targeted at companies, like you can do that on your own. You don't need an ABM platform to do that. The tech platform, the distribution mediums that they can measure and deploy on an ABM platform are completely predicated on attribution, not on effectiveness. It's only about the things that they can measure, and then they put the analytics platform behind it in order to help marketers prove that they did something instead of the marketers actually doing something. So I take a different approach, which is that, like, if you do communications well, you should be able to reach those accounts in a different way. It's more effective. I know, like, let's just say we are going after emergency medicine physicians, right? And there's 5,000 hospitals in the US, and I could run a ton of ads at Boston Children's Hospital, and it would cost me a certain amount of money, or I could run ads to all emergency medicine physicians. And I believe that the net impact of running them to all emergency medicine physicians at scale to create brand awareness and word of mouth inside of that community is greater than just running them targeted at Boston Children's Hospital. Right. And if you're going to run them just at Boston Children's Hospital, you might as well have your sales reps just call them.
Right. So, I mean, because...
So that's kind of my... Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I know you mentioned that you believe a lot in brand marketing versus performance marketing, but the reality of it is, Chris, that a lot of marketers working within organizations, they need some form of metric. They need something, some data, something to prove that, you know, they actually add value to the organization. And I mean, unfortunately, we still live in a world where it's very sales driven. So if we can say, all right, we're doing this, all right, perfect example. I was speaking to a head of marketing for a company a few days ago, and they had an event. Really, the event is branded for their company, but it's not necessarily trying to sell their services. It was more around things that they knew that the target audience would be interested in. So they brought in subject matter experts in different areas, whether it's business, entrepreneurship, finance, motivational speakers, whatever the case may be. And they got a lot of brand awareness, a lot of brand equity was built from that, but yet the conversation is still being had. Well, we're spending on this event, but we're not seeing any returns. Like, what is the return from this event? Why should we continue to invest in this event? So how can they really work around that? Because, I mean, in a perfect world, yeah, we would love if every single person, every company jumped on board to what we both believe in, you and I. But the reality is that that's not how it is in organizations.
The results of a marketing execution are not only predicated on what you did, it's about how you did it, right? So I believe firmly that live events, are the #1 execution in B2B marketing today. The problem is that most people running those events are running them in the wrong ways. And so if I was going to have that event, well, I know for a fact that people do it this way. They'll run the event, and then you know, after 3 days, the event is done and that's it. What they should do is they should pay the extra small incremental cost, have 2, 3, 7, 10 videographers on site. They should film all of the different content. They should then chop it up. And if you do that right on a 1 to 3 day event, you have content for 3 months. Right. And then you run media on that content to create awareness after the event. That's what people get wrong.
Right.
If I'm having an event, I am for sure capturing it. Another thing that, I mean, HubSpot does a good job. I don't go to that many of these like mega conferences. Having places inside of the event where people can take photos to then amplify that they were at the event on Instagram or LinkedIn, which then creates awareness of your event and your brand through that. So you get some social proof behind it. I think that's something that people miss. It's super small and easy. So those are some things that I would say. But to get back to your original question, whether it's digital or real life or some mix of the two, the metric is inbound revenue. It doesn't matter. To me, if I was a executive leader, unless they're a micromanager, it doesn't matter if it came from the event or that Facebook ad or whatever. If the revenue's coming in at an accelerated rate based on, and the customer acquisition cost is staying the same and the marketing ROI is growing, who cares where it's coming from? I'm not against performance marketing. I just know that it'll plateau. I just know that over time it will not continue to grow unless you're in a market that is rapidly growing with intent-based search. Right. And you have to create accelerated intent-based search through brand marketing. They are intermingled. The brand marketing just works better over time. Somebody has to create the awareness that drives the increased search volume for your Google AdWords to continue to grow. Is that person going to be you? Is that going to be your brand, or is that going to be someone else's brand? Because if it's someone else's brand, then a lot of that search traffic is going to be their branded search, not the generic term, and that's why brand wins. I want someone to come into Google searching Refine Labs because of all the work I've done up front, then to search growth marketing firm, I have to buy that word for $82, and then I'm going to convert that at a certain percentage. I'm going to do the work up front, which is called brand, instead of the work at the bottom, which is called sales.
Right, and that's a good point. But what if it's a case where the revenue isn't coming? Because inbound revenue, but we both know, working in the B2B space, that inbound revenue, best case, I would say you're looking at probably 30 to 40 days for that inbound revenue. Worst case, you're looking at probably 6 to 9 months. So what if it's a case?
Sales cycle or what? It's 30 to 40 days sales cycle, or 30 to 40 day what?
In terms of from the time that, well, yeah, I would say the sales cycle, yeah. Not necessarily.
Yeah, from when they come in to when they buy something. Sales cycle, yeah. Right. Okay, yeah. So continue.
Yeah. So how can they? Because the point is still, or the case is still being made, or trying to be made, that yes, we got the brand awareness, we got the social proof, the amplification online through people talking about the event, but a month has passed, 2 months, 3 months, and there isn't any way for you to say, okay, as a result of this event, here are the 10 people that end up creating an account with us. That will lead to X revenues over time. How can they prove that? Or is it that a system that they need to create at the event or post-event that can help them to do that?
That's not the purpose of the event. The purpose of the event is to create value for the audience and to have people there and create brand awareness, and then to create content, which I think is the most important part that you can amplify. The objective of the event is not sales, even though you know that you're going to create sales from it down the road. The challenge that most marketers run into is that in the chase of attribution, they do the wrong things, which then leads them to not actually convert anything, right? There's a big difference between doing the event, creating value, amplifying the content, and then waiting for the inbound leads to come in, which they will if you do it well, versus setting up a station inside of the event where you can collect scanned badges so that you can follow up on those people for sales. When you set up the booth to do that, it doesn't work as well.
Right.
It just doesn't, because you're chasing something that you can measure instead of just believing in the process and knowing that knowing the marketing that you're doing is the most effective way to use those dollars today. And so I see that all the time, like the Instagram ad that I talked about. If they had just given me the video, I would have remembered the brand in a completely different way than I do right now. I have their name in my head, and all I can think about is I don't know enough about the product to buy it, even though the ad was good enough for me to click through it. And you just paid, $3 for that swipe up. And if you had just given me the video, I probably would have converted. But instead, you tried to convert me in the chase for attribution on a mobile device, which is dumb. And now all of a sudden, I'm not going to buy your thing. And so there's so many different examples of that problem in marketing today. And in general, it is if you chase after attribution to prove what you're doing is working, you actually decline the effectiveness of whatever you're doing.
All right, excellent, great. So before we actually go, because you've been very gracious with your time, and I want to respect it definitely. Is there anything else that you'd like to add? Just anything that on the top of your head that you're thinking about right now in terms of that can add value to the audience.
Not that I could think of, no. The only thing that I would leave people with is that if they do not have a sound, well thought out, well funded, long-term or long-form video strategy, and they don't build that out this year, they're leaving a lot of upside on the table. Every company should have a videographer full-time that is producing, editing, and filming videos every day that are predicated on how do we bring value to the audience, not how do we bring value to ourselves. And they should be chopping those up, and they should be putting them on social media, and I'm living that right now. And I can tell you for sure, and our clients do it as well, and I can tell you for sure that it works better than whatever else you're doing right now.
All right, excellent. So how can people get in touch with you, if they want to contact you for your services through Refine Labs, or just in general? How can they reach you?
We can definitely connect on LinkedIn. Chris Walker, there's probably many, but you'll be able to find me on there. And then, refinelabs.com if you want to learn more about what we do. All
right, awesome. Chris, thanks so much again. I mean, I appreciate you, brother, for coming on, sharing your knowledge. I, for one, definitely got a lot of value from what you spoke about, and I'm sure the audience will as well.
Thanks, Winston. That was awesome, man. Good to chat with you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Take care.
See ya. Bye.